What did the fish say when he swam into a wall?
What?
Damn. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Bran Coverage. I'm your host, Brandon Carney, alongside Pat Gustafson. It is a beautiful July 1st evening here on the show. Got a lot to go over, and some of it involving a player that I didn't think we'd have to talk about really ever again.
Yeah.
And now here we are because he is the starting tight end of a current NFL football team. So that's just kind of where we're at. So today for the show, we'll go over some breaking news for the day. We'll give you guys an update on the Vampire League. We got a bunch of your submissions to join that one. Submissions are now closed, so please do not send them if you haven't already. A little bit of NBA, just trade draft reactions, because I mean, there's been just a lot that has gone on in that world since we last spoke to you guys. And then we will continue our divisional fantasy football previews with the NFC West. A good amount of fantasy goodness in there, as there's a decent little chunk in every division, I would say. But this one, there's like, I would say more than what division did we do last week? We did the AFC South, I think. This is definitely more than the AFC South overall, I would say. So it'll be a fun division to go over. But first things first, Pat, we've got the news.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
So, look, this started as a trade, which we were obviously going to go over either way, and then it had a little back piece added to the trade in the form of another trade. But it started as Minkah Fitzpatrick and a pick swap being traded to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, who will now be joining the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Arthur Smith gets his guy. He gets his Jonnu Smith. Very exciting. I think this probably craters Jonnu Smith's fantasy value, which we'll talk about in a second. But before we get into just the general takeaways of that deal, the other deal that followed it, Pat, was I think one that none of us could have seen coming. Now look, the Dolphins, as they got rid of Jonnu Smith, were very much in the market for a tight end because their depth chart behind Jonnu was horrific. I'll be honest, I did not expect their solution to come in the form of the unretiring 32-year-old Darren Waller. Darren Waller is now going to be, we believe, the Miami Dolphins starting tight end this upcoming season. Of course, this is generating all sorts of talk in, the fantasy community especially. They're like, is Darren Waller back on the menu? My answer, probably the fuck not, even though he's going to have an opportunity. Like, as little as they paid him, he's still, I think, the best talent on that depth chart, Pat. I mean, it's filled with guys like Pharaoh Brown and Durham Smythe, I think, is still around.
Hang on a second. Pharaoh Brown seems to always have a game where he catches a touchdown.
Pharaoh Brown, I believe, caught like a 50 or 40-ish yard touchdown for the Patriots either last year or the year before. So, yeah, you're right. He does pop up with relevance here and there. But, yeah, that was the follow-up to the Dolphins losing Jonnu Smith. It was replacing him with Darren Waller. They traded like a sixth for a seventh and Darren Waller to the Giants is what it was. So the Giants, got a little piece out of it. They like found some coins under the couch cushion, really, because this was a guy they just thought was going to stay retired, and they ended up getting something for him. So good shit.
Yeah, I love the meme of Jim Gaffigan where it's like, Darren Waller, the rapper,
the rapper,
like Jeff Epstein, the New York financier.
Was that Jim Gaff? That's not Jim Gaffigan, is it? Jim Gaffigan's a comedian. That doesn't look like. I know what meme you're talking about. It's the old guy that's like.
No, wrong comedian. What the fuck was his name?
I figured
his name was Jim.
Okay, I was like, Jim Gaffigan's the Hot Pockets guy. I'm like, I know what he looks like, and that's not that guy. But no, I know exactly what meme you're talking about. Darren Waller, the rapper. Yeah, part of me feels like, Pat, the failed rapping career is probably why we are seeing Darren Waller back on a football field. To Darren Waller's credit, though, I did see a interview that he did with John Gruden 3 months ago after he had been like off the grid for a while, firmly retired, where Gruden asked him if he would come back and play if Gruden was a head coach somewhere. And he said, I would listen if you were a head coach or if Frank Smith came calling. And that is the Dolphins offensive coordinator. He was the Raiders tight ends coach from 2018 to 2020. So obviously worked with Waller. So the seed was at least planted here, whether people realized or not that he was willing to play for Frank Smith and come out of retirement. And I guess Frank Smith maybe saw that interview and was like, All right.
Better him than John fucking Gruden, that's for sure.
Yeah, very true. So, Pat, let's get into just the analysis of this deal. So let's start, I guess, with the Steelers' perspective. I think they are maybe the funniest part of this whole deal, just because this trade at its core, and I made a video about this yesterday, like this is the Steelers trying to go all in. This is the Steelers' attempt to make as competitive of a team and a roster as they can to seemingly go for a Super Bowl in the 1 year of Aaron Rodgers that they're going to have. Aaron Rodgers saying that this is probably going to be his last year, thank God. But there's no other reason to make this deal if not for that. So there was a lot of talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick being a problem just in terms of communication on this defense last year. So they wanted to ship him out. They got a different DB in return. Obviously, Jalen Ramsey can play multiple roles in that defensive backfield. So we'll see where he ends up lining up most of the time. But then they also got Jonnu on top of it. So the Steelers are going all in, whatever that means for them, and I find that very funny.
Going halfway in, yeah.
Is it in yet?
Is it in yet? Fuck!
Get fucked. But for fantasy value, Pat, I think there's a couple things we have to look at here. First, I think Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith are both just dead. They're both just dead. Barring any sort of injury. This was a move that, obviously they're going to want to use Jonnu Smith, right? Arthur Smith loves the guy. I imagine this came from him largely, that he wanted to get Jonnu Smith, but he wanted to get Jonnu Smith in a way that, they're going to use him effectively on the football field, but not necessarily in fantasy-friendly ways, because Jonnu Smith, in order to be fantasy relevant, needs to get most of the work. In all of his years with Arthur Smith, he's never been a consistently fantasy reliable tight end. He's never averaged even 10 points per game in full PPR in all the years that he's had Arthur Smith either as his offensive coordinator or head coach. So Jonnu's dead. Pat Freiermuth was already hanging on by a thread. He's dead now as well.
Life support to begin with.
Darnell Washington is just 90 feet in the ground. I know.
Switching to tackle.
I don't think this changes much for DK Metcalf here. I mean, that's still going to be the only receiver, actual receiver on the field. If anything, Pat, I think acquiring Jonnu maybe just takes any residual thought I had of getting a different Steelers receiver as a sleeper later in the draft. Yeah, I think that kind of takes us off the table for me, just because Jonnu and Pat Freiermuth are going to combine for a decent amount of work. You're never going to know enough of who's going to get how much of that work week to week that either of them are going to be worth starting in fantasy, but I think they're going to take enough away from the actual other receivers on this team that you're not really going to be interested in a Calvin Austin or a Roman Wilson type anymore in the way that you might have thrown a dart at one of them before this. So I think this is unfortunately just an overall net negative move for basically every fantasy relevant piece here for the Steelers.
For the Steelers, yes.
For the Steelers. Now we can go to the other side with the Dolphins, though. I think I don't know. It's interesting now because now I don't know what to think. When it was just Jonnu was gone, right? And we were like, okay, they might trade for your boy Michael Mayer, Pat. That was one of the names that was floated around.
Would have been a great
would have been a good addition for the Dolphins, but I also think it would have made it fairly clear that Michael Mayer wasn't going to be probably a very fantasy relevant guy. You were probably going to be able to be more confident that the offense was going to once again run through obviously Devon Achane, but we get Tyreek and Waddle maybe a little more involved than they were last year. I think I would have had more confidence in that. Now that they replace him with Darren Waller, what do we think about this offense and the distribution? Because look, I'm going to be out on Darren Waller for fantasy no matter where his ADP or ranking falls into. Obviously, every site is still probably figuring out what the fuck where they're going to put him. But I'm not going to take a 32-year-old coming off of a year off of the NFL, and the last time he was in the NFL, he wasn't all that productive with the Giants. I mean, I know he had like a little over 600 yards in 12 games, so he was probably on pace for, about 800 yards on the season. He only had one touchdown. Just not a lot to go off there. Granted, it was with the absolutely abysmal Giants offense. So maybe there's some meat on the bone here for Waller, but what does this mean to you, Pat, for both Waller and the surrounding weapons on the Dolphins?
Ew! I don't give a flying fuck about Darren Waller. I love Darren Waller. But this does zero for me. The only thing it does is that one of your casual league mates will see Darren Waller's name and be like, "Oh boy, I remember him."
He'll be drafted in
rounds.
most leagues, I would say.
He will be drafted in most leagues when, quite frankly, I don't think he should be drafted in any. Like that's at the point now where even if you're taking a dart on a late tight end, I think there are plenty better options. Go with a rookie like Mason Taylor, or go with my boy Brenton Strange. Don't go with Darren Waller. I think this does really bode well for Tyreek and Waddle because we are back, which was what we thought last year, was that the passing game is going to go through just these two. And then Jonnu Smith just completely entered the equation, completely a surprise to everyone. You take that out of the equation, there's reason to believe that those targets just kind of go back to these two. Granted, Waddle has to stay healthy, Tua has to stay healthy for this to kind of fall into place really well, but I don't see why it wouldn't happen that way. Am I still super thrilled to take any Dolphins wide receivers? Like, no. Especially, Tyreek in the first, it's like, I'll go other ways. Waddle, where his value at the moment, yeah, I don't mind Jalen Waddle. Mm-hmm. But this is bizarre because outside of Devon Achane, there's nobody that I'm really, jumping off the page at to take here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because, do I believe they're going to find a way to get the wide receivers more involved? Yes. Do I know exactly how that's going to happen? No, because, look, the reason, other than the fact that their offensive line was brutal last year and also injured, and Tua was injured, other than those factors, the big reason they couldn't go through the receivers the way they wanted to is the Dolphins were getting that too high safety look played on them just constantly, because teams were like, look, you're not throwing it over the top. You're not fucking doing it. And I saw a stat, Pat, the Dolphins led the league in 2023 in too high safety looks played against them. It was 17% of snaps. Then they led the league again last year, and it was 28% of snaps. So they still led the league, and it went way up. Teams are just further committing to, you're not beating us over the top. If you want to dink and dunk in the 5 to 10 yard area of the field just over and over again, feel free, but you're not beating us over the top. So I'm curious, I can't imagine defenses are going to stop playing him that way, especially with the loss of Jonnu Smith now. So I'm are they going to just get more creative with their receivers? Are they going to ask, Tyreek and Waddle to do a little bit more of this intermediate area of the field work, which I don't know why, if they're going to do that, they didn't adjust to that, halfway through last year and make these guys a little bit more relevant than they were. Obviously, Tyreek was also battling a wrist injury. I haven't really decided where I fall on the Tyreek valuation. I guess we'll get there when we get to the AFC East in, 3 weeks. So I'm curious to see what happens with this offense. The only guy I am confident in this offense is Devon Achane. I think he is a great value. I think he is, his consensus rank right now is 14th overall. You can get him basically at the turn. I think he's deserving of a solid first round pick. Pat, I'd
take him significantly higher than
I was going to say, I've said it over and over again, but I picked 6th overall in our league. I don't think I'm going to take Achane, but will he be under consideration? Absolutely. This is a guy who's going to, I think, catch a lot of passes, and as long as this offense is not completely in shambles like it was last year, things can really only go up for the offense as a whole. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one for the Dolphins offense. I find myself leaning toward just believing that they'll figure it out with the receivers and kind of liking the value of Tyreek and Waddle. Not that means I'm going to go out of my way to get them, but Tyreek Hill, Pat, an obvious high first-round pick last year, right? 31st overall consensus ranking right now. So he's a mid third-round pick, and I think that's pretty tempting considering that they just got rid of one of the guys that they really ran their offense through. And whether Darren Waller can be anything more than dust, I don't know. But either way, he's going to be less than what Jonnu did last year. So I'm a little bit intrigued by the other Dolphins' weapons now that they have shooed away Jonnu Smith.
And to kind of bring it back to Jonnu Smith here, it's funny now how everyone's like, oh, Arthur Smith. He leaves Arthur Smith for a year and has a career year by a lot, which is, granted, going to get him paid by Pittsburgh. And they said, we're going to use him in the slot. We're going to use him as a fullback, yada, yada, yada. That's all well and good for real-life football. That's not doing a thing for me here. And before we really close the bow on this subject here, can we get a bar about Darren Waller here, please?
What, you saw the Waller video? Fuck.
I commented on YouTube. I said the rap was insane.
Oh, what did I say? A week ago, I was unemployed just golfing. Now I'm standing here and I'm a Miami Dolphin. Fucking bars, bitch. Shout out Kelsey Plum. My rap career is trash.
Would.
Just like Angel Reese.
Oh, here we go.
All right. No, she's actually been. Oh god. She's actually been playing better lately. All right. Real quick to touch on the Vampire League that we have started with our followers and listeners. We got, Pat, what? 70, 80 submissions? More than that?
I believe it's about 104.
So we got 100 plus submissions. We toyed around with a few ideas of what to do about that. We've landed on the fact that we are just going to be pretty cutthroat and pick, 9 submissions from this for this year. We were surprised by the amount of submissions we got, and not because, we know this show, each episode on my channel, Pat, gets probably, is at least in the off season, a little over 6,000 views, 7,000 views more during the season, 2,000 listeners or so on Spotify per week. I didn't expect that many people to go out of their way to write an email. I just didn't. Yeah. And so we got, over 100 submissions. So thank you to anybody who sent in your application to be in this Vampire League with us. We are going to select 9 people. It's going to be very difficult to whittle down. But going forward, knowing what this outpouring of support was like, next year I'd like to set up something a little bit more involved. I don't know whether it's like a super league where you kind of all, I know like the fantasy footballers do the Megala Bowl where they have like a bunch of separate leagues of their followers and then they all compete at the end and best of the best kind of deal. I think ESPN actually implemented something like that this year. Haven't looked into the details of it, but that could be something we do where we set up like 10 leagues that we just monitor. Like obviously I'm not gonna be playing in all 10 leagues. I'd fucking blow my brains out. But just something going forward that we'll know, we'll figure something out to get more people involved.
Yeah, the response here was fantastic. Well, first of all, some of your responses were just absolutely gut busting. Like someone wrote me a love letter, like a tried and true love letter. I sent out a canned response to everyone. That was me typing out that response to everybody, by the way. I had to break character for that. I just said, God damn it. I had to break character.
Whoever that was got the one extra special response.
But all the nice things you guys were saying was just so cool. I don't do this for a living. This is just kind of something fun for me. And for you guys to say that we make your days better, or that you look forward to listening to the podcast, or that it's just like talking to your buddies in high school and college about football, like that's awesome. Like that's why we're here. That's why we're here, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. So to see it going over well with you guys is fantastic. We love you. We're sorry you can only pick 9 people. It's gonna pain me, like physically pain me personally, but we appreciate every single one of you who applied and then those who didn't.
Absolutely. So we'll get those details out here, in the next couple weeks or so. Obviously, we got plenty of time before actual redraft season gets underway for fantasy. Got a little over a month to go. So we will get that figured out and let you guys know as soon as possible if you were selected for the first edition of this league. A little basketball, Pat. We'll get a little basketball before we get into our divisional preview because there's some fun stuff to talk about.
A lot of stuff.
So, first of all, let's fucking go Nuggets, baby. The Nuggets with their new front office, Pat, I could not be more thrilled at what they have done this offseason. Calvin Booth should be sent to any sort of German prison, whatever the dirtiest
Alligator
one is.
Alcatraz, apparently.
Wherever we need to send him, that it's just the most painful and dark and smells like socks, because it could not have been this hard to get role players around Jokic while he was there, considering the front office, new front office, was able to do it almost immediately. Send out Michael Porter Jr., get Cam Johnson, who is better and cheaper, and then add these other role players around: Bruce Brown, Jonas Valanciunas, and now Tim Hardaway Jr. It's the best supporting cast Jokic has ever had.
Even last night, I thought they had probably been like a top 3 or 4 team in terms of the additions they make. And then today they go and they trade Dario Saric for Valanciunas.
Useless.
And
yeah,
that's what I mean. Like a useless piece for a guy who, granted, is slowed down a bit, is kind of a backup, but a much better backup than DeAndre Jordan and Zeke Naji, whoever else.
A playable backup,
out. Yeah. That's what I mean. And then Tim Hardaway, they need the shooting that Tim Hardaway brings. Like that, they have done a great job, as opposed to Rob Pelinka, who I believe is playing with like Lincoln Logs somewhere, or sticking a crayon in his ear, Brother, do something. Do anything. Jake
was
LaRavia is something, but do something else.
It was funny for LeBron to opt into his, $53 million deal and then be like, oh, by the way, the roster fucking stinks. Fix it or I'm leaving. Like, buddy, take less than $50 million. Like, what the fuck? You're 40. So that was a pretty funny development. What other big deals happened in free agency, Pat?
Well,
I don't even...
Miles Turner today. First of all, Miles
Bucks.
Turner going to Milwaukee was shocking in itself. For them to then turn around and just eat Dame's contract was wild. But obviously that's what they had to do. And we heard all this talk about Bucks are going to blow it up. Bucks are getting rid of Giannis. This, everything. They're doing quite the opposite, aren't they? Like, you go and you bring in Miles Turner. You re-sign a lot of the role guys like Kevin Porter, Bobby Portis, Gary Trent. Obviously, you lose Brook Lopez. You lose Pat Connaughton. Sorry.
They brought in Gary Harris.
And Gary, I knew there was someone else. So brought in Gary Harris. It's like, they may not be one of the top feared teams in the East, but they're they're taking a shot at it, and they're not doing a bad job with it.
Yeah, I mean, the East has so much opportunity next year, right? We mentioned it last week how 3 torn Achilles occurred all in the Eastern Conference, right? It was Halliburton, Tatum, and Lillard, yeah. So these teams, obviously the Bucks being one of them that had the torn Achilles, but these teams realize that, like, a lot of the competition is falling out of competition for next year at least. Like the Celtics are not even pretending really to put together a contender for next year.
And
they are
Pacers
straight up taking the year
Pacers
off.
just letting Miles Turner willy-nilly walk away like that too.
Yeah.
It's like the East is wide ass open. I mean, they'll probably just get their throats stomped on by the Thunder. Well, the Hawks. The Hawks have
had a great offseason.
Again, we talked about it last week after the Porzingis trade. I'm kind of confused about what they're doing. They're going for it. Mm-hmm. They are really going for it. And they bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I'm forgetting other people here too.
Let's see. I've got it here somewhere because I have all the free agents up. Apparently it's not a top 50 guy. Oh wait, no, there's a Hawks logo. Luke Kennard is a Hawk.
Again, that's a good fit. You lose Karis LeVert, whose shot was shaky, and you bring in one of the best roll shooters in the league. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, wide open. They've got a really good chance to be really competitive here. And I had something else, another team that I wanted to talk about. Oh, the Rockets.
I was going to say, it was the Rockets.
Everything, extending Jabari Smith, extending Ime Udoka. You bring in Clint Capella just so no one else can have him, pretty much. Fuck you, thanks a lot.
Brought in Dorian Finney-Smith.
Dorian Finney-Smith, fuck you for that too. And then Kevin Durant, and obviously making that trade, moving on from Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks to give more playing time to Reed Shepherd, hopefully to Cam Whitmore. This team, it might be really, really good, but the Thunder are really, really, really good. So that could be a really fun battle to watch all year next year.
Nuggets, Rockets, Western Conference Finals, and Hawks,
Nets.
First
of all, their draft
is the funniest thing I've ever seen. Michael Porter Jr. is going to take 40 shots next year,
and especially if they don't bring back Cam Thomas, which they're going. They're going to match whatever Cam Thomas.
Otherwise, I'm playing shooting guard.
And someone said their 5 first-round picks would lose in the second round of the NIT. Like, they're just like, we're going to bring in all these freak athletes who just can't fucking shoot the basketball.
I am ready for the Danny Wolf breakout. I don't know about you, so Danny Wolf that was crazy. Okay, yeah, it's been a very eventful NBA free agency to start out with. As a Nuggets fan, very, very happy with how things have gone. Calvin Booth, I hope nothing but pain for you if this is what we could have been doing the whole time, and you wasted 2 years of Jokic's prime, but nevertheless. All right, Pat, let's get into what the people are here for. The NFC West Fantasy Football Preview. An interesting division. I think I've said that about basically all of them. But I think interesting in the sense that a lot of these teams, save for probably the Seahawks, are kind of returning basically the same shit that they had last year.
I'd argue this division has the single most interesting team in terms of ranges of outcomes. I'm talking about the 49ers. Like, looking at the ADPs and the consensus rankings, I'm just like,
yeah.
it's like nobody has a fucking clue what's going to happen here. But besides that, not a lot of turnover. I mean, obviously, you flop in Devontae. Well, Cooper Kupp stays in the division, actually, but you bring in Devontae Adams, you lose Debo, Popeyes, Biscuit, Samuel. What else? Really, not a whole
lot. It's
literally
the Cardinals. They lost Elijah Mitchell, but like whatever.
The Cardinals look the same as last year. I guess we start with the Cardinals then.
Yeah, the Cardinals are identical. They are an interesting
quite literally
one
identical.
Yeah, so looking over them and just trying to give them an outlook, I was like, all right, this just requires trying to figure out how these players are going to progress and how this offense may evolve, because in terms of the personnel, it is literally the same exact guys they had last year. No change at head coach, no change at offensive coordinator. Even the offensive line, Pat, returned almost everyone except for one starter, which was right guard Will Hernandez. They replaced him with Isaiah Adams. So only one guy changed on the O-line, and it was a guard. Weapons are the exact same. So let's start with Kyler Murray here, Pat. And this is a guy that I don't want in fantasy. I'll just say that off the top, because it feels like a lot of Kyler Murray's fantasy appeal and fantasy potential comes down to just how motivated he is, I guess. I don't know. It seems like... So I've got a couple quotes on Kyler Murray here. So first of all, there were some quotes in February from Jonathan Gannon where he was asked about Kyler's career low rushing attempts per game. Basically said it didn't sound like there was going to be any more of an emphasis on giving him more designed runs. So that was just going to stay the same. He did say about getting Kyler out of the pocket that it puts the defense in a bind. Those are some things we talked about this offseason that we wanted to add here or there, and it looks good right now. So at least maybe there's a concerted effort to do that. But the most interesting quote about Kyler Murray, Pat, and I think we mentioned this maybe on the show when it first happened, but it was from Brian Schottenheimer, who quoted his new offensive coordinator, Clayton Adams, who was the O-line coach in Arizona the last 2 years. And he said that some weeks Kyler would just say he didn't feel like running. And, take it with a grain of salt, obviously, because secondhand quote coming from a guy who was an O-line coach at his previous spot. And it's just kind of weird vibes to hear any sort of coach talk about a player that's not on his team in this manner anyway. But the fact that quote was said, and it kind of lines up to me with the perception, at least, that's been around Kyler Murray the last few years, because you look at Kyler's best year in 2020, where he ran 133 times in 16 games. And then last year in 17 games, he ran 78 times. Like, I know we're talking about 5 years of difference here, but I feel like people are still hoping for Kyler to be able to get back to that sort of 2020 production. There's no reason to believe, to me, that that's going to happen unless he just decides, hey, I'm going to start running again.
Yeah, the funny thing you say, like, back to 2020 form, that's 5 years ago. Like, we're not saying anymore, like, return to form 2 years ago. We're talking 5 years ago. Like, that is a long time. Kyler has gotten banged up. And, yeah, he's simply a guy... ADP on Fantasy Pros right now, QB9. I have him at QB15. Like, I just have no interest in him, because you look at this supposed rushing upside that just isn't quite there anymore. Like, they've got him ranked with the likes of guys. Really is the next highest of the rushing quarterbacks. But he's along with the guys like Mahomes, Herbert, Williams, Mayfield. I'd rather have all those guys easily than Kyler Murray. And I think, everyone loves to, like, shit on Trevor Lawrence for being this, like, kind of fraudulent never was. Kyler is just simply also that, but does not seem to take nearly enough of the heat for the same situation. Because the intangibles are there, the skills are there, but we have never really seen him put it together to the point where we're like, this is a top-tier NFL quarterback. It just hasn't happened, and it kind of... I'm not out on this offense, but it just dampens how I feel about it from him, and then Jonathan Petzing with how they operate. Drew Jonathan. I mixed Jonathan Gannon and Drew Petzing. God, I am so cooked in the chat. Cooked in the chat. Good talk before I keep talking.
I think we're on the same page with Kyle. Look, he was QB 11 last year, Pat, which is technically a starter in 12-team leagues, but the way he got you there, and we've talked about players like this at other positions, was just so maddening. It wasn't worth it if he got you there that way, because the week-to-week performances just varied so much. There'd be a week where he would blow up for 25 or 28, but he had far too many weeks of 10, 4, 11, 10. It just wasn't worth the problems that he gave you. And I just, with how nothing has changed in this offense, Pat, I don't know how you go into this year, expecting better from Kyler Murray. Why would you not just be expecting the same? Because it's not even like this is a player that you're expecting, a second or third year leap from. Kyler's heading into year 8 in the NFL, something like that. Let me see,
what
year?
Just go play for the
1,
A's.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, year 7 into the NFL. I know you should. So while I can sit here and we'll talk about this guy in a second, but I could sit here and say, yeah, maybe Marv, figures things out and makes a second year leap at wide receiver. Even if he does, there's no reason to expect that Kyler himself is going to change that much. Marv still scored 8 touchdowns last year. So how much more can he improve to help?
Apparently.
I know. How much can he improve to where it actually is a noticeable bump for Kyler? I just don't really see it. So I don't know. I don't like it, but it's annoying because or believe that the talent is there, lying within him to be able to be a fantasy relevant guy, but he hasn't shown the willingness to run, and this offense hasn't shown enough to me to target Kyler Murray as my fantasy quarterback. The running back situation, Pat, and this is appropriate as far as, talking about the only way it changes is if a guy takes a leap. Because James Conner's still here. We are expecting probably more of the same for James Conner. I kind of do. Not actually. But the only way things change in this backfield is if Trey Benson asserts himself in some way. Now, I have a quote from Gannon on Trey Benson as well about the expectation for him this upcoming year. Now, granted, this quote was from back in February, but Gannon said, I expect him to light it up if he takes the necessary jump from year 1 to year 2. I think we have 2 starting backs. That's kind of how I view those guys, and you see certain teams out there that have 2 1s, I would say. I think we should have 2 1s next year. So the expectation is there or the hope, I guess, is there from Jonathan Gannon that Trey Benson can assert himself and be more than just a pure backup to James Conner. What do you make of that quote, and where does that land you on Conner and Benson for this year?
I mean, of course you're going to say that. Of course you're going to say that in that position. You're not going to say, yeah, Trey Benson, he kind of fucking sucks. We whiffed on that one. No, you're not going to say that, but I believe it in the sense that, yes, I think Trey Benson is a good enough player to do that. That said, I don't necessarily believe it'll happen, but I think Benson becomes a lot more of a high-leverage handcuff here, where if something were to happen to James Conner, knock on wood, he's been healthy the last few years, Benson could step in and be a guy you're plugging into your lineup every single week. On standalone value with James Conner in the picture, it reminds me of Blake Corum last year, where it's he might be involved anyway, huh? And it's just I would rather take my shots in those middle rounds somewhere else than a case where it's a backup running back that might get more carries. He might get more. Yeah. But, like I said, if Conner were to go down, then I think Benson could very well be the guy that they talked about in that quote.
Yeah, Conner sitting at RB 19 consensus right now, and I think that's I don't know, Pat. I can talk about James Conner as much as I want and say that I think he's a good value here, and I think he'd be a good pick. Being honest with myself and true to my heart, I'm not taking James Conner. There's just no way. I can't. I've been off him this long. Yeah. I'm gonna stay off him because I'm not gonna get caught holding the bag.
The 1 year you jump in, he's toast. The way I see it with him is, at the core of it, this is an offense that likes to run the football.
Yeah.
And we just talked about how their rushing quarterback is not running the football very much. Who's going to run the football? And while they were inconsistent fantasy-wise, that was still a productive offense. James Conner still had a solid year last year. Granted, very volume-based, but even with this, Trey Benson, ascension that could happen, I still think the volume's going to be there for him to be a solid RB2.
Yeah, and I think the positives for James Conner as well, other than just he's the better back in this backfield. There was no fading with him at the end of last season, like week 14 through 16, Pat. Yardage totals of 90, 110, and 117 on the ground. And I think this is where I could maybe talk myself into somehow, buying into James Conner for the first time ever in his age 30 season. God, who am I? He's always pretty involved in the pass game. Like his reception totals in each of these games at the end of the year. I mean, really throughout the year, you're seeing a bunch of 5, 4, 4, 5, 4 receptions. Like those add up. Those add up, and it's usually for about 30 to 40-ish receiving yards, and they're going to keep leveraging that skill set.
And you'd think a team like he's the perfect guy to kind of pair with a pass-catching running back, like drafting like a Chase Brown, or having the ETN when ETN got drafted. Like he would seem to be a good fit with more of a passing down specialist, but they just don't do it. They just don't do it, and he seems to be. While I wouldn't truly call him a 3-down back, but he's doing the job out there in that situation, which only boosts what he can do. Again, it's not someone that I'm like ecstatic about picking, but at the same time, if I find myself in that position needing a running back, I'll happily take James Conner.
I think that's where I'm at too, and I think the reason I'm able to, and the reason why I always say I'm off of guys like James Conner every year is because I pretty consistently come out of the first couple rounds with at least one running back, right? Like you just know me. That's how I operate. I usually take one in the first round.
Yeah, me too.
If I don't, I take one in the second. Yeah, Mr. Zero RB. But like, let's say I found myself with a wide receiver heavy build, or I take a quarterback in the third. Like, if I have those guys and my RB1 slot is open come round, I mean, God, where's Connor going overall?
4, 4 or 5.
Yeah, like if it's 4, sorry, let me find exactly where. So okay, 50th overall consensus right now. So round late 4th, early 5th. Yeah, I mean that feels good to plug James Conner into your lineup when you are wide receiver heavy or you prioritize tight end or quarterback, because he's getting the work. And on top of that, the nicest thing about it, Trey Benson you can get basically for free at the end of the draft, and he is the clear handcuff to Conner. I don't think there's any ambiguity about who's getting the work if something happens to James Conner. The only real downside scenario is if Benson asserts himself to where it becomes a split backfield, but that just doesn't really seem to happen all that often. It's like I'm trying to think of another example of like an older back that just gets slowly loses his work. It usually just happens the guy gets hurt, the younger guy comes in and doesn't give the job up. It's not usually we're just going to start to involve both these guys more. So I don't know. I could see it in the right situation with James Conner. He definitely feels like one of the dangerous word, but safer backs to get at that point in your draft, especially if you've gone, receiver heavy early. Speaking of receivers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Pat, wide receiver. We've got 17 here in ADP. Then you got Michael Wilson, wide receiver 77.
My man.
Marvin Harrison Jr. is also just strictly an exercise in projection, right? Like there's nothing that would point to why you would want him on your team based on what he did last year, other than he's going to get better. So what do we think about Marv? Is he going to get better and better enough to be worth a pick where he's going?
I think, will he make the strides he needs to as a player? Yes. Will Drew Petzing play him the way he should? I don't know. That's the problem, that's where I'm not confident. But they seemed like the perfect spot for a wide receiver, or multiple wide receivers, either in the draft or free agency. And they didn't, which means like, hey, we've got Marvin Harrison. Also must mean they like Michael Wilson to some extent.
They love them some Michael Wilson and
just
Zay
like
Jones.
Me. Oh, for fuck's sake, Raider legend. But with that said, it's like they must believe in him. But we just talked about it. They like to run the ball, and their number one target is their tight end, Trey McBride. It's been clear that he is the target monster on this team. It wasn't like we thought, like, oh, Marvin's going to step in and become this target monster. No, and that's not going to happen. Obviously, is there room to grow? Yes. We saw him have those humongous games where he was making these great plays. I just remember seeing one of these things about, like, it was like downfield speed or something, and it was just like a bunch of deep threats and him.
Yeah.
It's like a receiver with his skill set, with his build, should not be that fast. Like, this kid has all, like we say, like, oh, they've got all the tools. Like, this kid has all the tools to be an elite wide receiver in the NFL. That being said, I owned him in a league last year, but I'm just so spooked by his misusage that, again, am I saying I'm not taking him? No, not at all. I'm not out on Marvin Harrison by any means. But the thing is, you look at these other guys in this range, and they all have, some kind of concern. Whether it's like, T. Higgins is the number 2. Travis Hunter's the number 2 and might be playing a lot of defense. Devontae Smith, number 2. DK Metcalf's on the Steelers. Like, these guys all... Chris Olave's brains are made of goo. Like, they all have... You're reaching that point where everybody sort of has something that's making you step back a little bit. Yeah. And I think out of all those reasons, maybe not guys, but out of those reasons, I'd rather take a gamble on a guy like Harrison, who is at least going to be the wide receiver one. He may not be the number 1 target, but theoretically he could be a huge part of this offense. And again, I think I always say, like, I'd rather stay out and be wrong. I almost think I'd rather jump in and be wrong here.
That's fair. I mean, look, Marvin Harrison Jr., 42nd overall consensus ranks here, spending about a mid-4th round pick on him. Where I've kind of landed, at least right now as of July 1st with Marvin, Pat, because you name all those receivers, and I'm completely with you. Like, I don't particularly like any of them more than Marvin Harrison Jr., or at least not much more. I don't think I'm taking a wide receiver in this range. Like, this range, looking at overall, looking at, like, consensus ADPs, the guys at other positions surrounding Marvin Harrison Jr. within just a couple of picks of ranking, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Hurts, James Cook, Chuba Hubbard, Joe Mixon, James Conner. I feel so much better about all those guys than I do Marv. And granted, draft boards will fall the way they do. Maybe I end up taking 3 running backs with my first pick, and then
because everyone in our league will.
I know.
Except
And
me.
then I have to take Marvin at that point. But like, in general, I really like the guys at the other positions here. And I'll also say this, like, I was doing some research about just draft capital for, like, NFL draft capital for receivers, right? And relating it to what their fantasy rank is this year. Because I was thinking, like, Marvin Harrison was the 4th overall pick in his draft. It feels like generally guys that get drafted that high turn out to be pretty good in fantasy eventually, right? So I was looking up just prior draft classes and guys that were picked that high, and I thought I was making a pretty good point.
Dorian
and then I got to 2017, which
Corey
wasn't
Davis.
that long ago, and it was Corey Davis at the 5th overall pick, and then there was John Ross at the 9th over. I was like, I'm not saying Marv's going to be one of those guys. It just my gut feeling of draft
your
capital
perception on that was not
didn't feel as solid.
True.
One quote I do want to throw in about Marvin before we move off this is from GM Monty Ossenfort back in February. And this was, we couldn't be happier with Marvin. Are there things he has to do to get better and improve on? Absolutely. I think the encouraging thing is I've been in the office every day since the season ended. Hasn't been a day that's gone by that Marv's not in here. Marvin is wired to improve. He's a football player. He means a lot to our team and is only going to go get better. So at the very least, it sounds like he's putting in the work to improve. Does that mean Drew Petzing is going to call better plays for him? Don't know. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly what Marv's going to do this year. If the draft capital or if the ADP gets out of control, where it's like, oh God, Marv, year 2, he's going to make the leap. Yeah, probably will be even less interested in him than I am now. Because as of right now, I don't know. It's scary when a guy underperforms and then nothing changes like around him at all. No different play caller, no different nothing. Because it's like, I understand he's got a whole offseason now to, improve things and work on things, but it's like, why didn't the play calling or anything really see a major difference in season? Why were these adjustments not being made as the season went along? So that's kind of where we're at with Marv. I think it's hilarious, Pat, that like, not that this is one of the only offenses, but like, we're just not interested in the wide receiver 2 whatsoever. I guess it's just because of the tight end is so good. Because Michael Wilson is just not on fantasy radars, and for good reason.
No, Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if anything, he's a kind of a late round dart throw, which again he's not an awful late round dart throw, but with just like we said, the combination of having an elite tight end, rushing volume, they just don't need it. It's almost like the Ravens, where it's like they just don't need a second wide receiver.
Right. So as far as it relates to Trey McBride, I mean, look, tight end 2, ADP of about 23rd to 25th overall. Yeah, like that. Yep, that feels good to me.
See, I'm so torn here on guys like McBride and Brock Bowers. Throw Brock Bowers into this equation where it's like they are great. They are great. And I talked about it, how the tight end position is a little bit of hot garbage this year. So there's the part of me that's like, I want one of these top handful of guys. But then you look at other guys going in this range, running backs and wide receivers, where, like, for example here, I just had it up. Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, in between them, you have the likes of Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Taylor, our Lord and Savior Bucky Irving, T. Higgins, Josh Jacobs, Garrett Wilson, and then right after JSN, Chase Brown, even Rashee Rice. It's like, I think I would rather take one of those wide receiver running backs and roll the dice at least a little bit on tight end. I mean, straight up, spoiler alert, George Kittle's in this division too. I much prefer George Kittle at 40
Me too.
than I do McBride at 25 or Bowers at 18.
Absolutely.
Easily. But again, the production will be there. The production will be there. The question is kind of just, can you get your hands on another tight end that can give you solid production while also getting a really high level running back wide receiver at that 2-3 turn? I'm absolutely not out on him as a player. It's just, I just don't necessarily see myself, at least in our main league. I always, in my other leagues, is when I'll take QBs and tight ends early. Maybe there I'll have him, but in the leagues where I'm really, really locked in, I don't foresee myself having a lot of Trey McBride or Brock Bowers for that matter.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that is the price you pay to have one of those top-tier tight ends. You are taking them over these guys who are great at other positions because the tight end position is so dicey beyond those top 3. I'm with you. I think it's a clear misvaluing, and we'll talk about George Kittle in a little bit, but the fact that he's going like 12 to 15 picks later than Trey McBride seems criminal. I know McBride's younger, but like I think George Kittle, there's no way there should be that much separation between those guys. I feel like this feels like the same conversation as last year, Pat, when we were talking about Sam Laporta. It was like, and obviously things went worse for Sam Laporta than we could have ever imagined, but we were like, there's no way Sam Laporta should be this much higher than everyone else. The gap just doesn't make sense. That's how I feel about Trey McBride to George Kittle. But look, Trey McBride's still one of the safest picks you can have if you want to lock down that tight end position. He's the only guy Kyler seemingly knows how to throw to, and the touchdown regression should be there.
Even like Laporta's going at 70. TJ Hawkinson's going at 85. But again, after that, that's the thing, is like those are great values, but then after that it's like, So it's like you're taking a gamble where it's like those 3 are great values, but what if you pass up on Bowers and McBride and then miss out on this kind of next level? I'm personally higher on Mark Andrews than the average Bear, and I like David Njoku and whatnot, but it's like you're kind of playing with fire here with a tight end position in a year where it might get ass at the end of the tight end 1 slate here.
Might be getting a little ass. All right, let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams here. LA Rams, one real major change to their offense. Other than that, not a whole lot, I would say. But the major change, obviously, lost Cooper Kupp, replaced him with Devontae Adams. Head coach is the same. OC is the same. Their offensive line returned everyone, but they added a new starting center, Coleman Shelton, who started all 17 games for the Bears last year. So O-line's basically the same. Run game's always good. The offense in general is always good. The other differences, I guess, if you want to talk about them, are Sean McVay has talked about he's going to play Tutu Atwell more, which based on the loss of Demarcus Robinson, he's going to. Is that going to make Tutu relevant in fantasy? Probably not.
Not too much.
All right. And then they drafted Jarquez Hunter into the backfield to give possible competition to Kyron Williams. But let's go over this offense, starting with the quarterback, Pat. Matthew Stafford, I think we know what he is for fantasy at this point, right? Pocket passer, like not really interesting.
Quite literally the least amount of rushing upside of any quarterback in the NFL. And
the biggest discrepancy in the league between where you would rank a real life quarterback in a fantasy
No,
quarterback. Because
no-
like he's a
no
top
que-
5 guy real life, at least close to it.
Yeah, I think when it's all said and done, whether, when his numbers pile up, that guy will be in Canton by when it's all said and done here. But yeah, for fantasy purposes, I talked about how I like the position a lot more this year. You look at guys in his range like Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, your boy Drake May. Give me any of those guys over Stafford, just because of the fact that their upside is a bit higher. But again, if you're kind of playing the streaming game with Matthew Stafford, I think he's fine. He's fine, but I just think, and that offense is going to be really fucking good. So he's going to have some games where he throws for 4 or 5 touchdowns. But on a consistency standpoint, I'll pass. I'll take my shot on someone else if I were to wait until that range to get a quarterback.
Yeah, Stafford broke 20 points 3 times last year. Now, granted, the Rams were in shambles. They had periods without Puka Nacua early in the year. Then they were without Cooper Kupp as well. But still, just not the kind of upside you're looking for at the quarterback position. Running back, Pat, we've got Kyren Williams. Now, he is consensus RB 11. And then, Blake Corum behind him, Jarquez Hunter behind him, newly drafted. How are you feeling about Kyren Williams before I give my Kyren Williams thoughts?
I am very, very mixed on Kyren Williams in the sense that we kind of talked about last year where it's like, wow, is he going to be able to replicate the same volume he did last year? Granted, he played the whole 16 games. He had 316 carries last year. Yeah. And it's like, we've seen time and time again that Sean McVay is not afraid to run the wheels off guys. He literally killed Todd Gurley, for God's sake, at the end of the run there. Like, he is not afraid to give his one guy all the carries. And from that aspect, it's like, yeah, awesome. It's a great offense. Kyren is a decent real life running back. Another case where I don't quite believe he's quite as good as his fantasy output, but that doesn't matter because he's a decent running back in a great situation where a coach has proven to give him the full workload. But what if he doesn't?
Yeah.
But what if he doesn't? Because Kyren is not strictly a volume guy. He's a volume guy to put him at RB11.
Yeah.
Like, he would still be a very, very playable starting fantasy running back if some of that volume gets taken away. But is he RB11 in that case? I don't know. And that's why I'm having some slight reservations about it.
Kyren is a guy that has volume bullied his way to the fantasy finishes that he's had the last few years. And so if he gets that volume again, great. He'll do it again. He'll do it again. But there's that everlasting concern, Pat. I mean, look, the Rams have now drafted running backs in back-to-back drafts. There is that concern that Kyren Williams, he's not going to get his job taken, but if he sees, 10, 15% fewer snaps in a given year, he's not going to be worth this draft capital. I am always wary of a guy who is getting most of his points based on volume. And that's not to say Kyron's not a good running back. He's a good running back. You don't earn 300 plus carries if you're not doing something good with
Especially
them.
From someone like Sean McVay who knows ball.
Right. But at the end of the day, I do think this backfield is kind of screaming out for, somebody that's a little more, makes bigger plays, makes more explosive plays than what Kyren Williams offers. And I think that opportunity for some work alongside Kyren Williams will be there. Now, look, if Jarquez Hunter's not up to the challenge and he can't take any work away because he's just not good enough to do so, same with Blake Corum, it might be another season of Kyren. But I'm just not interested in drafting a guy that might lose work just because the type of player he is finally revealed to be the type of player he is. I'm not interested.
That's the other thing. It's like, we could also be talking by the middle end of the year looking like absolute fools. Where it's like,
it's absolutely possible.
Everything indicated that Kyren was going to be the volume monster, and turns out he was. Like, look at Josh Jacobs last year, for example. Everyone was like, well, it turns out he just got every fucking carry pretty much. But, and could we see Kyren doing that again? Yes, granted, I think Josh Jacobs is a better running back. But, yeah, again, looking sort of in that range of guys. It's all, give me Bucky. In Bucky we sucky. Give me Chase Brown, Jonathan Taylor, James Cook. I think I like all of those guys better than him. Again, just on the fear of a drop-off. Again, not an old man drop-off, just
Right.
the volume finally coming back down to earth.
He just hasn't shown enough to be like this player you're super excited about as a talent. And I don't want to draft a guy that is so volume dependent, because then when he loses his job, then when he starts to get a little less work, I'm going to be like, oh, well, I should have saw that coming. Why did I take this guy? So it just remains to be seen if a guy that's worth doing that or capable of doing that is on the roster. I don't know, but I don't want to be the one to find out. I'd rather take a flyer on Jarquez Hunter maybe to see what he can do. Pat, it's your boy. It's time. It's time. Where's Puka? Pat's got the lotion out. Oh no! Oh no! I heard it.
Go ahead, Bran. Start talking. Go ahead. I do not.
All right, we're actually going to move on to the tight ends here.
I don't like how this lotion smells either. I don't want this on my hand or body.
We're actually going to move on. I'm just going to talk about the tight ends. Tyler Higbee. No. Puka Nacua, Pat. Has just also bullied his way to the top of ADPs, but not bullied because he's not talented, bullied because he is talented, and just I don't know how he fell to the 5th round in the NFL draft that he was in. Puka Nacua, wide receiver 5, about 8th overall in ADP, a certified first rounder, the alpha in this offense, even though they brought in Devontae Adams. Just as safe of a pick as you can get at the wide receiver position early on.
Jesus Christ himself, and it would not, this kid is just a revelation with just going in, the 6th round, 7th round he went, to being an elite talent in an elite situation with an elite play caller. And you lose Cooper Kupp, where, sorry, I saw chat, it made me laugh a little bit. Cooper Kupp, whose kind of whole thing was volume. But Puka was that guy last year. And you bring in Devontae Adams, who, of course, is going to get his own. We'll talk about him in a few minutes. But I don't care. I genuinely don't care that they brought in Devontae Adams in terms of Puka. It changes nothing about how I feel about Puka. What he's going in ADP is wide receiver 5. I got him at 4. I got him a little higher, but it's just so difficult because it's like you're not taking him over Jamar Chase. Mm-hmm. In theory, you're not taking him over Justin Jefferson.
No.
I might take him over CeeDee Lamb. But at the same time, it's like, if Lamb and the Cowboys figure it out, we're talking a potential wide receiver 1 overall from CeeDee Lamb. So it's like 4 or 5 is very appropriate for Puka. But at the same time, it's a hell of a value. It's both appropriate and a value. Because this kid is just so goddamn good. And for them to relinquish Cooper Kupp and say, we're moving on, just goes to show how they feel about Puka. And now I'm going to move to off camera because I'm wiping my lotion off and then laying down on the couch cushions on my floor.
Pat's going to lay down on the couch after applying lotion. Man, what's he doing over there? No, I think, look, Puka is, again, one of the safest picks you can make in the first round. The only thing that raises an eyebrow at all is just how hard he plays, and it seems like it lends itself to him getting banged up maybe a little more than other receivers, but the talent's so elite that it doesn't matter. Even factoring that in, look, he's ranked right next to Malik Neighbors, who has just a forever toe issue, and then, you got Amon-Ra St. Brown below that, who's got his own sort of red flags, Nico Collins below that, who seems to have a soft tissue injury every 5 minutes, so these guys all come with a little something. Those concerns are well worth stomaching to get a player like Puka, who is attached to a quarterback like Matthew Stafford in an offense like the Rams. Absolutely worth a first-round pick, every bit of it. So he's an easy one. You feel good if you're taking Puka. Devontae Adams is the other wide receiver in this offense now, and I think we're probably going to see a pretty nice little resurgence from Devontae Adams. Sean McVay apparently made just his own custom cut-up highlight tape for Devontae Adams, showing what he could do in their offense to convince him to come to LA. Clearly it worked. But Devontae Adams currently wide receiver 16 consensus rank. Overall, let's see, what round would you have to draft Devontae Adams? So 34th overall consensus rank, so you're spending a late third on him. I would be tentatively pretty okay with that, considering just, again, Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, the consolidation of targets that are going to be in this offense. Like, look, I like Terrence Ferguson going forward in dynasty leagues, all that, but between him and Tyler Higbee, don't expect the tight end position to be involved that much. Tutu Atwell, I do think is going to, show himself every once in a while. But I just think, Pat, the targets are going to be consolidated enough, and Devontae Adams has enough left that even at age 32, he's one of these guys that he's such an incredible talent that getting up there in age does not concern me as much as it does some other guys. It's kind of the Derrick Henry argument in a way.
I am back, by the way. I accidentally started my camera instead of
saw
my
that
mic.
for a second.
So there was just a quick flash of me in the sexy paint me like one of your French girls positions. And you could clearly see the no pants. So if you guys want to pause and screenshot that YouTube, if you guys really want the image. But yeah, I'm all in on Devontae Adams as well, because you think about it, his numbers weren't awful last year amidst all the nonsense in New York with Aaron Rodgers and yada yada yada. He had some really nice games there at the end of the year. Like, yeah, he's getting older. I mean, we don't hate old wide receivers quite as much as we hate old running backs.
Right.
But again, going to just a fantastic spot where, if arguably better than anyone, this is the spot to have two productive, and not just productive, very productive fantasy wide receivers. And if we're talking real life players, I'd much rather have Devontae Adams on my team right now than Cooper Kupp.
Oh, easily.
Take cost out.
Kupp has hit the cliff, unfortunately.
That's what I mean. Take cost out of the equation. It's like Kupp. This is an upgrade over Kupp. The only thing I think for Puka is that Devontae Adams is one of the best wide receivers of this generation in the end zone and in the red zone. So that could potentially cap a little bit of Puka. But again, I'm not worried about Puka at all. And I think that there's going to be enough there for Devontae in terms of volume and touchdown opportunities.
Yeah, I just think it's whether it's a last gasp year or if he's got 3 maybe more years of production left in him, I think he's at least got this year left in him, and everything just screams to me that he's going to have a really nice year. It's just set up too nicely. He's too good of a player. He's got too good of a quarterback, too good of a play caller. So I would be very okay with Devontae Adams as my wide receiver 1, or more ideally my wide receiver 2 if it came down to it. Tight ends, not really anything to speak of, I don't think, in this offense, Pat, because Tyler Higbee's there. Terrence Ferguson's also there. Tyler Higbee has not quite come back from the injury as well as you would hope. He's also getting older. I feel like this is just going to be a slow play Terrence Ferguson takeover, and neither one of them is going to be super relevant in fantasy. Again, we talk all the time about top 2 target on your own team. No shot either of these guys touch top 2 target on their team while they are healthy.
You even think about the third target on that team. You talked about Tutu Atwell.
It's going to be Tutu Atwell.
Well, it's Tutu Atwell, and it's going to be maybe some Jordan Whittington. The targets that aren't going to Puka and Devontae are going to go to the other wide receivers, I think, more so than the tight ends. Not again, Terrence Ferguson, I absolutely agree, could be a great dynasty pick. No interest in the position.
I would agree. All right. The San Francisco 49ers, Pat. Is it bounce back season for San Francisco? So, quick team overlook. Obviously, head coach, still the same. They have an offensive coordinator by name for the first time since Mike McDaniel left for the Dolphins in 2022. It is Clay Kubiak. So, won't probably change much materialistically.
Nepotism,
but it is still something to note. Just, the Niners decided that something needed to change, I guess. Offensive line is fine, returning everyone except left guard Aaron Banks. They're replacing him with Ben Barch, but otherwise they're returning everybody, which was from basically middle of the pack offensive line overall. When Trent Williams gets hurt, it becomes doggy doo-doo, but otherwise. Weapons, they lost Deebo Samuel, added Demarcus Robinson. Beyond that, not a whole lot of change. Run game's good. Offense is very good when healthy. So I guess we could start with Brock Purdy, Pat. QB 13, 98th overall ADP. Feels like a safe guy to have, but I don't know. It's not a guy I'm going to be overly excited to trot out there either, just because the story with Brock Purdy really is sometimes there are games, and this requires Christian McCaffrey to be healthy or any running back to be healthy, but sometimes there are games where he just hands it off all game because that's what's fucking working, and he doesn't need to do anything for this offense to win games. Last year, we actually saw Purdy break out some of his own rushing upside because the Niners offense was in such shambles. So I think in a normal year where things are normal for the 49ers, you're looking at a guy with like a 12-point floor, but then he's got a decently high ceiling. So I don't know. How would you feel about Brock Purdy if he was your fantasy quarterback this year?
Yeah, I kind of view him akin to a guy like Jared Goff, where, the ceiling may not be there quite as much as the rushing guys, or even there's a couple pocket passer types that I like more than them. But if you're kind of, not punting the position, but if you're going to be one of the last guys to take a starting quarterback in your league, I think you're going to be real happy with a guy like Brock Purdy. Because, like you said, there might be some less than stellar games just because of the game script, how the 49ers are doing. But it's also the 49ers, and if we think we could bounce back, that could be a really electric offense. And Purdy, we talk about how Purdy is kind of the perfect guy to run this Kyle Shanahan offense. So obviously he's going to reap some of the benefits in terms of fantasy scoring. Again, do I see myself being one of those guys to punt quarterback and taking Brock Purdy? No. But in theory, if you would, I think you could do a lot worse than Brock Purdy.
I would agree. Again, Brock Purdy, QB6 in 2023, Pat. So, that high-end overall upside is there. Now, I do remember that was the year where he had, an absurd touchdown rate passing-wise. But that's not out of the question to happen again with the way the Niners offense works. Running backs, Christian McCaffrey, RB5, ADP, 11 overall. Isaac Guerendo, RB48, 147th overall. Christian McCaffrey is the real litmus test for how big of a sack you got, because it's scary, man. We have talked endlessly on this show, Pat, about how injury prone is not really a thing and that running backs just get hurt because they touch the ball so much that it's going to fucking happen. But Christian McCaffrey, it has happened over and over and over again. And the double leg arthritis just scares the shit out of me. And here's the thing, he's healthy right now. He is
king.
He is by all accounts fully healthy as we sit here and talk on July 1st, 2025, heading into camp, heading into the preseason. He is good to go. And so maybe I'll be convinced to invest in Christian McCaffrey as we approach actual draft time, because, if nothing negative happens to him from now until then, I might buy into the fact that, okay, he is a value because he can finish. He's probably the favorite to finish as the RB1 overall if you could guarantee health.
That's the thing, is that.
So how convinced am I going to get that he's going to be healthy, basically?
Yeah, and at 11 overall, I am uber smashing taking the chance on that if I'm in that position. Because, again, say he's reasonably healthy. Maybe misses a game or two. You're still going to get RB11, 11 overall, RB5 value back for that. Yes, I like all the guys going ahead of him. I love Bijan and Saquon and Gibbs, but you're looking at a guy who could just, he could waltz to an RB1 overall season.
Oh, yeah.
That's
We've seen it.
We literally saw it 2 years ago, and even in the games where he was back, he didn't look that bad last year. So, yeah, it's the question of, do we think that this trend continues for McCaffrey or not? If I'm in that position, I am 1,000,000% taking that chance.
I think that's fair. And look, McCaffrey's another guy, Pat, where, like how we talked about with James Conner, it's nice when you've got that clear backup. Elijah Mitchell's gone. Elijah Mitchell's in Kansas City. Isaac Guerendo's the guy if McCaffrey goes down. And Isaac Guerendo, again, is at RB48, 147th overall. So you'd have to take him in a 12-teamer about the 12th round, maybe the 11th or 10th, just to feel really safe about it. I'm okay taking Isaac Guerendo in the 10th round if I draft Christian McCaffrey in the first, just to be safe, make sure I get him. And then you're kind of set. Look, unless we think the Niners offense is going to completely combust like it did last year, which was a ridiculous set of overall circumstances, you kind of got to believe in the run game here.
And here's the thing. If you say the offense completely combusts, George Kittle was a top 3 tight end last year. Jawan Jennings had a breakout year.
The runners were still good either way.
Jordan Mason was great filling in. So you could say even if this offense implodes, it's still a Kyle Shanahan offense.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I definitely agree. If you take McCaffrey, take Garendo, even if that means you got to jump a round or two even on him. You got to have that safety net. And again, clear handcuff. Jordan Mason's gone, Elijah Mitchell's gone, long gone. Tyrion Davis Price is long gone, but that's a goddamn name.
God.
And so you take Garendo, but yeah, in that position, I'm taking McCaffrey.
I think at the turn, it's definitely understandable. Just the upside there is immense. Wide receivers here in San Francisco, Pat. This is one of the more contentious sort of groups because we know there's upside here. We just don't know exactly where it is. Got Jawan Jennings, wide receiver 34. Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 41. Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver 50. Brandon Ayuk, I think, is kind of a hard one to talk about here because we don't know how much time he's going to miss to start the year. It doesn't sound like he's going to be healthy week 1, and he is a PUP candidate. Could miss possibly the first 4 or 6 games of the year. I'm going to, for all intents and purposes, say I'm probably not drafting Brandon Ayuk this year, Pat, unless they come out and say, he's going to be ready for week 1 somehow. He's just not a guy that even at the peak of his powers, I'm willing to wait 6 weeks for. I don't. I'd rather wait, or I'd rather take somebody else there.
Yeah.
So as far as the other guys here, unless you disagree on Ayuk, like Jawan Jennings or Ricky Pearsall, I don't know. I'm not sure who the right answer is there either.
I think I've started to get an idea of who I think the right answer is, and I think the right answer is Ricky Pearsall. Like, to the point where I think we talked about this situation a few weeks ago where I was like, oh, Jawan Jennings, this and that. The more I look into it, the more I realize that those circumstances last year for Jawan Jennings blow-ups were very favorable to him. Mm-hmm. Ricky Pearsall got shot. Like, that man was shot.
He was shot.
And Ayuk had the injury and all the contract stuff before the season. Debo was hurt, pneumonia, fat, all sorts of stuff. And even George Kittle missed a couple games as well. Of course, Jawan Jennings was going to have these huge games. But you think about it, Ricky Pearsall was a first round pick, and Jawan Jennings was been a practice squad guy for a lot of his career, kind of just like a 3rd or 4th wide receiver, even in San Francisco for a lot of his career. Like, yeah, he'll be a solid guy, but I think it's, again, set value and rankings aside. Just give me Pearsall straight up. Like, if I'm looking at this and it's like I have the opportunity to draft them in the same position, I'm taking Ricky Pearsall.
I agree. It's the classic depth chart argument between a guy that has shown a lot more in Jawan Jennings, but is a lesser athlete, lesser investment for the 49ers. He was a 7th round pick in 2020. And then you got Ricky Pearsall, who obviously hasn't shown a lot yet he was a rookie. He missed some time, but then really started to come on at the end of the year and was a 1st round pick. So I'm with you, Pat. I am going to go on the Ricky Pearsall side of things. I like Jawan Jennings. I think he's going to be a useful player at times this upcoming season. But at the end of the day, we are talking about a guy who is entering year 6. And if he was that good of a player, he would have forced their hand more by now.
Exactly.
I'm glad he's finally getting what looks to be a mostly full-time role on offense because they shipped out Deebo Samuel. But I just think, there's a reason that things have been like this throughout his career. And I also want to look at what the end of last season looked like with these two because Ricky Pearsall flat out outproduced Jawan Jennings down the stretch. And I always like looking at what guys did at the very end of the year because that's kind of what, leads you in to the following season. Ricky Pearsall's last 2 games last year, Pat, 8 catches on 10 targets for 141 yards and a touchdown, and 6 catches on 8 targets for 69 yards and a touchdown. Jennings was, to his credit, got 10 targets in each of those last 2 games, 7 catches, but only 67 and 52 yards, no touchdowns. They were clearly trying to get Pearsall more involved, and Pearsall was producing, and it just so happened to be, that was when he was finally ready to come out of his shell after getting fucking shot.
The man was quite literally shot.
I agree with you. I am more excited to invest in 1st round Ricky Pearsall than I am in Jawan Jennings. But I don't blame you if you want to take the shot on Jennings. He has shown, flashes here and there for sure, but most of Juwan Jennings' points last year came in that one fucking game, Pat. And
Against me, yep.
I know it was against you. 11 catches on 12
Was
targets.
everyone's blow-up game
175.
last year against me?
I
missed
know
the playoff
Taysom
by
Hill
one.
sure was. So, yeah, that's my bad. So yeah, Ricky Pearsall over Juwan Jennings, at least as far as this podcast is concerned.
Wait, hang on. Where is it? That's for me.
If anyone, I've thought about this, Pat. If anyone just didn't deserve a Taysom Hill blow up game, it's me. Like I didn't deserve to have him do that.
No, you didn't deserve it.
With how much I've shit on him throughout the years, and he just immediately converted me with fucking 3 touchdowns and 100 whatever million yards he had. All right, tight end George Kittle. Pat, I flat out think George Kittle could be the tight end 1 this year, and I know that's not necessarily a bold take because he's in that top tier of tight ends as it is, but like I borderline think George Kittle should be the favorite to be tight end 1 this year. If it weren't for anything but age, and here's why, other than just he's really fucking good. Longest offseason that George Kittle's ever had to recover and just generally feel better, because normally the Niners are so deep into the playoffs that they are losing months of possible recovery time. So he's got the longest amount of rest that he's ever had. And Pat, this was an interesting, just under the radar signing. The 49ers signed Luke Farrell, blocking tight end, to a 3-year, $20 million deal with $11 million guaranteed. That's not a small amount of money. That suggests to me that they want to have a blocking tight end out there a pretty good chunk of the time, which is going to free up George Kittle to just be a receiver all the fucking time.
That's the thing, because he is the full package tight end. Like, he is such a good blocker. And I didn't even really think of that. You make a great point. I'm not willing to say that I think he could be the tight end 1. I think Brock Bowers with a better quarterback and a better play caller now. We'll talk about the Raiders next week, actually. We'll talk about the Raiders next week. But still, we go back to value. Same thing I said with Trey McBride. You're getting George Kittle in the middle of round 4 as opposed to McBride and Bowers. So you're getting close to the turn of the second round. Like, it's not a huge difference, but significant enough, talking about all those guys in that 2-3 turn range that I like so much. And again, after Kittle, it starts to get a little bit scarier. You know, like Laporta, Hawkinson, solid. I like Mark Andrews. But after that, it's a fall-off. So it's like, I am completely fine to take a guy like Kittle a little early, maybe over another useful running back wide receiver. I'll do it a little later for someone like Kittle, though.
Yeah, I love George Kittle. I don't know that I'll draft him this year because, again, I have had personal success waiting on tight end, and every time I take a tight end early, it doesn't work out. So I guess I might just be cursed as far as that goes. Fuck you, Kyle Pitts, still. So I don't know, but I'm definitely more enticed. This is the most enticed I've ever been to draft George Kittle specifically, just with the changes that the Niners offense has undergone, losing one of their pillars of the last few years in Deebo Samuel, and them adding this blocking tight end that possibly frees up even more looks for George this year, and with him just being fresher than he's ever been. Let's move on and finish up with the Seattle Seahawks here, Pat. This is certainly the team that has undergone the most change in this division this offseason. Their head coach is still the same. They have a new offensive coordinator in the form of Clint Kubiak. Offensive line is pretty ass. They drafted guard Gray Zabel to hopefully help things a little bit. We'll see how much that can actually do. As far as their actual offensive pieces, lost Geno Smith, lost DK Metcalf, lost Tyler Lockett, added Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Overall, downgrade. So evaluating this offense as a whole, Sam Darnold I don't think is on any fantasy radars. I mean, look, he's QB 26. He's going to be a guy that is maybe a streamer if he somehow shows he has the magic that he had in Minnesota. But even then, I'm not going to be that excited about it because he's just not surrounded with the absolute gaggle of juicy weapons that he had in Minnesota, where you felt like he didn't really have to do anything. Now, that's not to discredit him. He did a lot in Minnesota. He actually had some really nice games. But I'm just not going to feel good going into games where I'm like, okay, Sam Darnold has to play well because he's not going to get bailed out by Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones. He's going to have to get bailed out by JSN's a good player, but lost several steps. Cooper Kupp, no real tight end to speak of. running backs that are hurt all the time. So I think the Sam Darnold book is closed for now for fantasy.
Yeah, and you talk about that Minnesota magic that he had. I think that was because he was in Minnesota. Not to say that he's going to be bad, but I think that was just such a good situation for him. And Seattle is just objectively a far worse situation for him to be in.
Yeah.
Everything except for his bank account. So, yeah, not really something that I'm even thinking about.
No. Running back wise, different story. Kenneth Walker, RB15. Zach Charbonnet, RB37. Pat, I want to love Kenneth Walker, and I do love Kenneth Walker this year. I just need the guy to stay healthy. I just need him to stay healthy. The fact that he's already got an ankle injury that's being talked about, I don't like. They said that, they think he'll be fine, and I'm inclined to believe them. An ankle injury in June/July is not necessarily something I'm worried about. Now, if they said he had, I don't know, that fucking nerve damage or something, I might be concerned. It got shot, sure. But, ankle is usually something I think you can probably recover from in several months' time. So I'm not that worried yet. But God, man, with Kubiak coming in here and with how much they've already said they're going to be running more outside zone, which was just an incredibly favorable, fantasy-friendly run scheme to run, and friendly to Kenneth Walker specifically, I think he could be a monster this year. I just need him to stay healthy.
Look at what Alvin Kamara did in a Clint Kubiak offense last year. And again, without a whole lot behind JSN and Kupp, there could be passing opportunities here. But, you talk to the health of it. Zach Charbonnet is another one of these top handcuff guys. He was really fucking good for that 3-game stretch there at one point last year when Walker was out. He carried me in my guillotine league one week. He was an absolute menace where he had like 3 touchdowns. But again, similar to Trey Benson, it just kind of scares me for someone that you're kind of banking on, like, hey, maybe he'll cut more into his workload. It's like, and I took him in like our deep sleeper draft, months ago. But again, I think that's more so on the principle of Walker potentially getting hurt.
Yeah, which is fair at this stage.
That's the thing, which is fair. So I do love Zach Charbonnet as a talent, but in fantasy, it's just kind of hard to justify it.
Yeah, to me, Pat, Kenneth Walker is a guy that I look at the RB 10 to 20 rankings, and out of everybody in that range, Walker on Fantasy Pros consensus right now is smack dab in the middle of that at RB 15. I think Kenneth Walker has the most upside of any of those guys to be like a top 5 guy by the end of the year, because the scheme that he's in, the talent that I believe that he has, I'm very, very in on Kenneth Walker. I just hope that by the time our draft rolls around that he doesn't have some vague injury red flag like he's seemingly had throughout his whole career. Because again, don't believe injury prone is a thing, to the sense that one running back is more injury prone than another. And it's at least, I think, kind of encouraging that most of Walker's injury issues have been all different injuries. Like, they've been ankle, hamstring, oblique. The guy just gets banged up, and he's not, he doesn't have this chronic thing that's ongoing.
I was about to say, the only time you could really argue when someone's injury prone is if you're like Christian Watson and you keep pulling the same hamstring.
Right, exactly.
Like, I was about to say, I'm pretty injury prone, but the same fucking thing happens to me once every 6 months. So,
right.
Of course.
Exactly. So that's where we're at with those backs. Jackson Smith and Jigba, wide receiver 14, 26th overall ADP. Cooper Kupp way down there, wide receiver 46, 92nd overall ADP. I just don't find myself super excited to invest in the Seahawks passing attack. Kubiak has made me interested in investing in the backs because I've seen what he can do with them. I just don't have a lot of trust in Sam Darnold. I could be convinced into drafting JSN just because I do think Cooper Kupp is pretty cooked. So I think we're looking at basically one real volume receiver in this receiver room. Obviously, Marquez Valdez-Scantling is there, and Kubiak intentionally brought him over from New Orleans. He's going to keep catching 60-yard touchdowns every other week, so just be ready for that. But in grand scheme of things, don't think he's going to be relevant either. But JSN, I think I could be convinced on JSN. He's just not a guy I'm going to go out of my way to draft.
Yeah, it's tough because we saw him finally. Well, not finally. It was only last year was year 2, 3. Yeah, it was only his second year, and he broke through. Everyone kind of thought that the first year he was going to be sitting behind those guys firmly, and he was. And last year he finally broke out, and now he's the guy.
Yeah.
Like, you bring in Cooper Kupp, which is a big name, but like you said, he's on the decline. He is the guy now, and he has proven that he can be that guy. And while we think this offense is going to be a run-first offense, JSN is still the clear number one target here, with what we believe to be a competent quarterback in Sam Darnold, more than competent play calling from Clint Kubiak. It's just that in the range he's in, there's a lot of other guys that are also very interesting. That, like, you look at, when he's 14, like Ladd McConkey, Cortland Sutton, Devontae Adams, Rashee Rice. Like, those are all guys I think I might want more than JSN, just because, like, Seattle's not in elongated ew territory, but they're closer to
close.
it than they're not. They're
Yeah.
closer to it than they're not. So, yeah, but I definitely can see a scenario in which I'm drafting JSN in that area, and even with some of these concerns, he is still the number one target, and we don't think that team should be that bad to where that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and look, Cooper Kupp is very much being drafted with meaningful picks in fantasy leagues, or at least is projected to be 92nd overall ADP. So we're talking, what, eighth round-ish or something, seventh, eight, nine. So like that's a relevant pick. I'm good on Cooper Kupp. This feels. I heard this comparison on the Fantasy Footballers pod, Pat, and I thought it was so apt. This feels like Jordy Nelson on the Raiders. Like, this doesn't feel like, oh, you're gonna go somewhere and have this resurgence at the age that Cooper Kupp is at. Yeah, here's the violin. I don't see the upside with the Sam Darnold offense, a wide receiver 2, run heavy. It just feels like a wasted pick to me at that point, and it's just chasing the name value at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I guess no tight ends are on my list because they're not in the top 200. Similarly to Terrence Ferguson, Elijah Arroyo's a guy I like in Dynasty. I
Agreed.
just don't think there's quite enough room, especially with Noah Fant still there. And Jake Bobo, our Lord and Savior, but there's just not quite enough room for Arroyo to be all that fantasy relevant this year. But Dynasty, sure, absolutely.
I would agree. All right, that wraps up our NFC West fantasy football preview. Come tune in next week for the AFC West. We've got some goodness in there. And also
Broncos country, let's ride.
Oh, no.
it's been a minute since we played that one. But for this episode, folks, for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bran loves backs. Bye-bye.
All right. And for those of you here, man, we got 24 super chats today.
Guys, I'm exhausted.
Thank you guys for these chats. I am
Thank you
too.
very much.
I'll motor through these. Let's see. Lucian with 2 said Jalen Ramsey might take safety snaps as well as cornerback. I know. That's why I said he's vaguely just a defensive back for the Steelers. So we'll see where exactly he slots in. Bailey with 2 said the Steelers roster would be awesome 5 years ago.
Oh my
Totally
God.
agree. They would be awesome with Caleb Johnson in literally middle school. I agree. Bailey with another 2 said, watch Mike McDaniel make Waller a 1,200-yard guy. Brother, if that happens, I will eat this hat live on stream. And also, you could buy this hat at benchwarmerbrand.com. Just so you know.
Oh, boo.
Had to sneak one in there.
Boo.
But yeah, 1,200 yards for Darren Waller, totally.
I just about end it all.
Favorite rookie coach by Liam Cohen. Bashal!
After how much you said you liked
2.
Travis Hunter last week.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it is a close call, but I'm still going with Bashal Tootin. Omega with 499 said, doesn't matter what the Steelers do, it's still the Ravens' division to lose. I mean, yeah. Also for you, Brandon Pat, as Poppy once said, the Yankees lose. All right,
They
buddy.
got their
All
fucking
buddy.
cheeks clapped by
Listen.
George Springer.
The Yankees just aren't very good, all right? UConn Husky George Springer, though, so if it was going to be anybody, I'm glad it's him. Dalton with 1999, thanks, man, said, hey, Brand, been watching your TikTok since he's large. Jordan Davis found the pod last year. Love to be in the listener leagues with you and Pat. Who's each of your top CFB teams for next year? Ooh, top CFB teams? God. UConn. UConn's going 12
Central Connecticut Blue Devils.
UConn, well, one of us is going to be, because they play week 1, so.
This guy donated $20. I got to actually look at this.
Well, okay, I'll give a serious answer about UConn, though. UConn has the chance to have a really good record this year because we fucking play nobody.
Nobody,
Like,
yeah.
every year, normally UConn has like a game or two against an Ohio State, a Michigan, whatever the fuck it is, usually a Big Ten team. And, you know, we're going to get destroyed in those games. This year, the best teams we play are Duke and Syracuse. Like, UConn has a chance, outside chance, tiny chance, to be one of those teams like fucking Liberty, where you look and 10 games in, they're 10-0, and you're like, wait, what the fuck? So I'm holding out hope. That's the best chance we've got to get nationally recognized.
Playoff territory?
That's the thing. It's like how bad can your competition be where you still like you have to get a look at the playoff just because you're undefeated? Like, can we do that? Because I'd like to do that. I'm just saying. Because UConn, I think if you were to look up Vegas odds for all our games, I imagine we're favored in probably all our games. Maybe not the Duke game or the Syracuse game. I don't know. But we're going to be favored in most games, and there's a good chance we go 9-3, 10-2 type. And if we manage to go 12-0, I'll see you in the ship, Ohio State or whoever the fuck.
My serious answer, I'll go Texas with Arch Manning.
Fuck you and fuck Arch Manning. How about that?
But I am not nearly educated enough to be giving a take on this on July 1st.
Same. Bailey with $5 said, also thought my Rockets would get KD and call it a day, but nope. From the days of trading for John Wall to buying him out to KD and Dorian Finney-Smith. Yeah, it's been a good time for the Rockets this offseason for sure. Alex with 5 said, I got to sing national anthem for the Pacers a few years back, and the Miles Turner jersey I wore that night will now be hoisted to the rafters. Man. R.I.P. Miles Turner. He ain't dead. He in Wisconsin now. All right, Bailey at $4.99 again said the Nets having two guys in Thomas and MPJ who shoot threes and nothing else is so funny in peak basketball. Bro, the Nets are going to be league pass appointment television.
That's what I mean.
Year.
They're going to be so bad, but they are going to be so ridiculous. I can't wait.
Yeah, that's going to be.
I might have
to keep
the Gotham Sports Network app through the Yankees offseason for this.
Shit. Alex with 5 said, little late on this, but the Texans' backfield should be called Crossing Swords because it's all about mix and chub.
Ha.
I don't think I get it. Crossing
like
swords.
You're mixing chubs with
Oh,
each
you're
other.
mixing I get it. Penis jokes. JA17 Glazer with $4.99 said Josh Allen will win MVP. May I continue your legacy, GP Glazer.
GP
14.
Glazer was here. Is GP Glazer still here?
I'm not
GP
sure.
Glazer, show yourself.
Dalton with another $4.99 said cooked and bald. That's at Pat. Cooked and bald.
Wait, that could have been about anybody.
You said I'm cooked, chat, so it's at you. Ashley with $4.99 said, have we seen enough of Tyler Shuck to determine whether he could develop into a franchise quarterback eventually? Well,
I mean, maybe.
I'm good. Well, I'll say this. No, we haven't seen enough considering actual camp hasn't started yet. I'm not going to say we've seen enough of anything in rookie mini camp to say anything.
The only thing, though,
it's possible,
franchise quarterback is that he's going to be like 40 in a couple of years, so it's going to be tough for him to really establish himself.
Yeah, the real problem is he's the third oldest quarterback in the NFL right now. So that's the real deterrent. No, it's possible. Look, he's a second-round pick. I'll be curious to see what he looks like when
especially with Kellen Moore.
Yeah, when pads actually come on and we're actually moving at full speed here, because it's not impossible. Lucian with 5 said Kyle Pitts to Miami would have been funny just for the annual Kyle Pitts breakout year cycle of misery and disappointment. If anyone was predicting Kyle Pitts breakout because he went to Miami, I would have asked for their heads on a fucking platter.
I would have been far more optimistic about it than I was about my boy Darren Waller.
Well, Kyle Pitts was an active NFL player last year, barely, but he was.
Well,
so I mean. Camden with 5 said if Giannis magically ends up stop. Giannis is not going to OKC. Then Sam Presti should go into the Hall of Fame with the best rebuild in sports history.
Should anyway.
Brother,
Bro. Yeah.
They just won a ring. If Giannis, I'll kill myself straight.
That's the thing is they don't even need to make that big move for Giannis to win the ring. They won a ring with what they have now. They don't need to blow it up to bring in Giannis to do it. They could just go run it back next year. They have everybody under contract.
Yeah. Dalton $4.99 said, can we get Bran hates old people in the chat? Listen, it's not inaccurate. So Camden with another 2 said Arthur Smith collecting tight ends like Infinity Stones. Yeah, we're going to see the rare 7 tight end set.
I don't know what Infinity Stones are, but my first thought was kidney stones. So apparently Arthur Smith likes kidney stones.
Yeah, Pat, I wasn't like, look,
You see his FedEx dad died? Rip Arthur Smith,
Yes, I did.
FedEx dad.
You can't. I know you're so removed from just the world of pop culture, but you can't just not know what Infinity Stones
What's
are. You
an
don't
Infinity Stone?
It's from the event. It's the Thanos, the things he collected on his.
I barely know who Thanos is.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, never mind.
I
Lucian
don't
with-
watch movies.
I didn't
Food
watch them.
Network.
I've watched them recently over the last couple of years, but I still knew what those were before. God, you're literally Patrick. You live under a rock. That is what you are. Lucian with $2. Lucian with $2 said 2017 was 8 years ago. Feels old. Yeah, I know.
Doesn't feel old. You are old. We are old.
Dalton with 199 said Kyron equals big load back. Yes,
Arguably the biggest load back.
Kyron's fantasy value depends entirely on if he can continue to be a big load back. Absolutely.
If he can take the big load again, then yeah.
Lucian with $5 said hot take volume shows big load back ability more than you think. I don't disagree with you. That's why I said not just anybody can get
Gotta be able to
300 touches, but like I also don't want to ignore the fact that when you're getting 300 touches and you're not necessarily a super blow you away type of player, you just lend yourself to losing some of that work to somebody who is uber talented. Like, and it could happen that they find somebody like that one day, but no, you're not wrong. Dalton $4.99 said Pat's wiping the lotion off. Ayo. I mean, yeah. Daniels with $1.99 said, where did Pat go? Pat is in the trenches.
That answers that.
Lucian with $5 said your favorite team makes a Super Bowl. If you take Kyle Pitts in fantasy, would you do that? Yeah, I would. To get the Patriots in the Super Bowl with what Kyle Pitts costs now, yes, I would do that. Because Drake May, seeing him and Vrabel win a Super Bowl, I would just simply bust my nut absolutely everywhere. Aiden with $5 said, can we send Kyle Pitts to Gator Alcatraz if he turns into a bust of the week?
Yeah, can we get Alligator Alcatraz as a weekly feature on the Bust of the Week? Yeah,
that sounds like a good idea to me.
Lucian Bust Anonymous. I forgot what it was called. Jesus.
Lucian with 2 said, what kind of back investment are you talking about? Oh, God, I'm not sure what this is in relation to. You asked
I
this
think
at
you said you liked
6:57.
backs and wanted to invest in backs or something funny. I'd like to invest in a new back if anyone is selling theirs.
I'll blow my own back out. Dalton with 999 said, way too early Super Bowl predictions. I have said this and I will stick by it. Eagles, Broncos for now. But that's where
Bengals, Lions. I'm a big fan of large jungle cats.
Fuck. Wait,
Yes?
what'd you say? Wait, never mind. I'm just going to let it go.
Bengals, Lions. What do you mean?
Oh, Bengals, Lions. Okay. For some reason, I thought you said Bengals, Giants, and I was like, wait a minute. No, that's horrible
that would
for
be
so many
ridiculous,
reasons.
And 2, they are not a large jungle cat.
That was my main concern. Will the GOAT Tommy Millott
Yes.
win MVP? Obviously.
Yes, he will.
Gwendolyn with 199 said Arthur Smith want Kyle Pitts next. He fucking might. All right, that was a lot of donations. So
Get
I
Michael
think
Pruitt in there.
I think we're gonna call it a day here after that. Especially since the only real question I see from the general chat was someone also asking our Super Bowl predictions.
Wait, who
So
said
we
Pat is
answered that.
beyond hope at this point? Lily, what do you mean by that? Did I say something? What did I say?
I mean, is she wrong?
Yeah, she's not wrong, but I'd like to know the context so I can at least know what she's right about.
That's fair. Hold on. We got another $4.99 from Bailey. Said the last MVP to win Offensive Player of the Year was 2018. Crazy it was Mahomes. Yeah, that's why I fucking hate awards, because they're all vague and ambiguous and dumb.
No
Alex,
pop culture. Oh yeah, you're right. You're
Oh,
so fucking
yes.
right.
Yeah. Alex had one good question here. Said, I've been using actual NFL footage, no logos and videos, and I'm only kind of familiar with fair use laws. I know you don't use them, but what's your stance on that? I'm sacrificing some cash for growth. I don't really have a stance. I don't as a monetized YouTube channel that does this for a living, I do not risk losing the monetization on my videos, which is what happens when you use NFL footage. So my stance on that for growth, I don't think it's a bad idea, because your videos are going to be more engaging, but also I would advise you to think down the line. Like, let's say you start making videos because you have that kind of footage in your video. Once you monetize and you have to stop doing that, that's going to be kind of weird for your audience, just because they're going to be like, oh, I started following you and you had this and now you don't have it anymore. Is that the make or break for your content? Maybe not. So that's up to you to decide, whether you're okay with not doing that eventually going forward. But that's why I never really did it, just because I was like, I don't want to change the style of anything going forward. But
okay, I'm going to address the allegations real quick here. The reason my sexy face is not on camera is that I have a genuinely crippling back problem. And sitting in a computer chair for like more than an hour makes me literally want to die. So currently I'm laying on couch cushions on the floor in my band room. And I don't think you guys need to see that, except for the fact that I did accidentally show that, and I have no regrets about it.
We love horizontal Pat. All right, that'll do it.
Oh no, did the surgery not help? Yeah, and then it didn't.
It'd be like that. That'll do it for this episode of Brand Coverage. We'll see you guys again next week with the AFC West for the horizontal Pat Gustafson. I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next time.
Good night.